The Historical Society collects, preserves, and presents local history, and that means all history. We present an inclusive community narrative that creates a greater understanding. Wow, the wind, or Jenny is with us. A greater understanding of our neighborhoods, the city, and its place in the larger world. Tonight, we mark the opening of an educational installation, Discovering Jenny, the personal collection of a state senator, and we say goodbye to Centro de la Raza, the John A. Taboada Legacy Collection, 1970 to 1985. Both of these exhibitions are made possible through the generous support of donations and sponsors, and the largest of which for both of these is the Port of Long Beach. Let's give the Port a big round of applause. And I'd like to acknowledge the largest supporters of the Centro Show, which include the City of Long Beach, Vice Mayor Uranga, LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn, Councilwoman Zendejas, Janet and Lawrence Watt, Ultimate, and again, the Port. The Historical Society also receives operational support from the Arts Council for Long Beach and its generous Crest Circle members. Tonight, I'd like to publicly share the very special gift made by Ron Arias and Ana Espinosa, and Ana is John Taboada's wife. And they are contributing 300. Hi, Anna's right here. And they are contributing 3,000 of John Taboada's negatives to the Historical Society's collection. The collection will be preserved and processed, increasing the Chicano materials here. And this gift leaves a legacy that will help inform students, educators, researchers, and historical programming about Long Beach history, the Centro, and the Chicano movement for generations to come. And I thank you very much for this honor. HSLB can only mount exhibitions like the Centro with partners, and partnerships like the one with the Long Beach Chicano Community History Committee. And I'd like to recognize that committee here today. So with us this evening is Margie Rodriguez, Teresa Moreno, Phyllis O. Arias, Ron Arias, and our good friend Carmen O. Perez, who could not be with us this evening, and the late Armando Vasquez Ramos. I have other exciting news. We're currently in conversations with Long Beach City College. They're interested in borrowing the Centro exhibition. Installing this show at LBCC would expose thousands of local students to this vital history. So only without you. As you know, members of the Centro de la Raza organized the Long Beach Chicano Political Caucus. And they supported candidates who were allies to the community and to elect. They supported Latino candidates for elected office. One of those important candidates was the Honorable Jenny Oropeza. So welcome to Discovering Jenny, the personal collection of a state senator. I'd like to recognize those who made this installation possible. We have Sharon Weissman. A little bit about Sharon. The estate of Tom Mullins, the Oropesa family, and Lynn is with us today. And once again, the Port of Long Beach. Oropesa's collections are being preserved for future research, exhibitions, and projects. And this is what your ticket here supports tonight. Harbor Commissioner Sharon Weissman's forethought made this all possible. She was a dear friend of Jenny's. She worked with the Mullins family, the Oropesa family, and called her own house for items and papers to preserve Jenny's legacy. So thank you, Sharon, for everything, for recognizing HSLB as an important place for Jenny's collections, and for your many contributions.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to the Historical Society for this amazing exhibit. I am
so sorry.
Nope.
Bring that a little bit more in your direction.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for this wonderful exhibit about Jenny. I know you mentioned her, but I do want to recognize Lynn Oropesa, Jenny's sister, who's here. And I am going to take just a moment to thank everyone for being here, but I particularly want to thank my friends at the port, those who knew Jenny and those who didn't. It means a great deal to me that you're here tonight. So thank you. Although Jenny and I went to high school together at Alhambra High, I met her in Junior Achievement, which was a program for high school students designed to teach you about the American business system. I recognized right away that she was a bright person. She had a great deal of energy, and she would volunteer for whatever we needed. I remember at the first meeting I was at with her, she volunteered for our bulletin board committee. So that was the beginning of her public service. So we went to Cal State Long Beach together, although she always was fond of reminding people that I was 2 years older than she was. So I served as AS administrator, which they now call chief of staff, and I drafted her to the Elections Commission. She then went on to run for AS president and was the first person to serve twice as AS president at Cal State Long Beach, as well as the first Latina. It was the beginning of many firsts. It was there that she discovered her passion for public service, for representing people who didn't have a voice or felt they didn't have a voice, and she also met the love of her life there, Tom Mullins. And it was Jenny who led the fight with the Teachers Association of Long Beach to change the Long Beach Unified School District from at-large elections to 5 distinct district elections, allowing the district for the first time to have representatives from the very diverse population of our city. Yeah. And she was tenacious. When it didn't pass the first time it was on the ballot, she tried again, and the second time was a charm. That is how she and Bobby Smith were elected to the school board and became the first African American and the first either Latino or Latina to be elected to the Board of Education because of that change. Well, you probably know, some of you will know Jenny's resume, so I'm not going to go through her everything, all her offices here, but I thought maybe it would be more interesting to know a little bit more about Jenny, who she was as a person and elected official, and give you a little insight into that. Unlike most folks, Jenny loved to campaign because she said it was because she met so many of her constituents, and of course she loved to make me campaign. And that was a good thing that she left to campaign because Jenny never had a free ride. Somebody always ran against her, and she would say, how come other people, nobody runs against them, they run against me? Well, it could be she was a little outspoken, and so, and she also, unlike many elected officials, didn't mind fundraising because she loved to talk to people, and she knew that that was how she would raise the money to be able to get her message across to the voters. Now, some of you know this, that Jenny was very demanding, that she was always fair. I worked for her, and she would tell us, as she used to be a field rep for an elected official, she knew what our jobs were, and so she expected the very best from us. We proofed everything before we sent it out. I'm still sort of known as a proofreader. That's where I got it. And we would get brochures from the Assembly or the Senate, and we would proofread those. We would call every phone number. We would click on every website. And we would check every address. And I have to tell you, we did catch a few errors. So after Jenny died and 2 of her employees went to work for another member, I was chatting with that member's district director. And she said, you know, I never have to worry about the employees who work for Jenny. They're always on time. They're always prepared. They're easy to work with. And I said, you know, if you worked for Jenny, you could work for anybody. And I don't want you to tell them this because neither of them are here, but the 2 electeds I worked for afterwards, that was easy. And Jenny always stood up for her principles. She was very supportive of the great boycott that her hero, Cesar Chavez, started. And you may know, or if you don't yet, if you haven't looked at the exhibit, that she was a proponent of naming the park after Cesar Chavez. But grapes were never served in the council lounge while Jenny was a city council member. And in fact, a 14th, so City Hall, the old City Hall was 14 floors, and the mayor and the council members were on the 14th floor. So a former 14th floor employee told me that one day she was at her desk eating grapes, and someone said to her, it's a good thing Jenny Oropeza isn't here to see you eating those. You know, Jenny never gave up. A few months before Jenny died, when she was too ill to travel to Sacramento, she was at home participating by phone with the Senate Democratic Caucus. And Governor Schwarzenegger to cut the budget, had recommended canceling the Every Woman Counts program. And that program provided annual examinations, including mammograms for low-income women without insurance. She was successful, the program was funded, and she saved the lives of an untold number of women through preventative screenings. Jenny always used to say to me, you got to bring the next ones along. And so she was a mentor to many, many people, many young women, but men too. I think maybe there's one here at least. And she felt that you have to develop the next leaders because you won't always be here. As an elected official, she championed uniforms in school, and Long Beach Unified School District became the first large district to implement a mandatory school uniform policy, which many people believe led to improvements in school safety, learning environment, and student behavior. She fought for and was instrumental in the city council passing a domestic partnership ordinance. She introduced bills to protect people having tests or treatment with radiation. She made it illegal to smoke in cars with minors present. When Jenny became an assembly member and the Alameda corridor was almost finished, she realized that the only street which would not have an overpass, the only major street over the corridor, much of it's in a trench, but that was Pacific Coast Highway, the busiest street along the Alameda corridor. So she brought together all the organizations, government entities, to see that that overpass was built, and it was. She got the legislature to put the requirement that the Green Line connect to LAX in ballot measure R. And this is just a few of her many successes. She was recognized with a number of honors and awards, both while she was alive and after she died. I don't know the numbers, but I would guess that Jenny is one of the very few people that has two state highways, parts of state highways, named after her. I have to admit that I always knew how special Jenny was from the time I met her, but I didn't realize how special she was to so many other people until she died. And so I do hope if you haven't looked at the exhibit yet, you will. Again, I want to thank the Historical Society for this. It is amazing. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mario Cordero, the CEO of the Port of Long Beach, and someone who worked with Jenny when she first became involved in politics in Long Beach. Mario?
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. And it's really a pleasure to talk or be able to be here and talk about Jenny. And I tell you, I'll go back in history many years. I started at Long Beach State in 1970, and that year was the largest concentration of, at that time, Chicano students, as we were known, that were admitted to Long Beach State. And one of the first people I met was Ron Arias, who was already there. So it was a large contingent at that point, of Chicano students who were admitted to Long Beach State, and it was an exciting time. You had people like Armando Vasquez Ramos, leading the charge on behalf of MECHA. And throughout the 4 years I were there were a number of efforts to get involved or get elected to the Student Senate. And we failed many times. We just didn't have the vote. And the reason I mention that is because many of us who were there, we knew that ultimately the way we're going to create change is to be at the table, whether it's the Student Senate, whether it's at the school district, whether it's at a city council, and the state legislature. And in fact, I think I recall it was maybe 1972 that we had a young aspiring legislator come to speak to the Chicano students at Long Beach State named Richard Auditory. And finally, we had an elective Chicano Mexican-American to the state legislature. So now this brings me back to Jenny. With the efforts that we made to try to get on the student senate, the student body senate, and we just didn't have the success, much less a president. Jenny did that when she was at Long Beach State. And as Sharon mentioned, she was the first Latina of the AS Senate at Long Beach State. So that gave us, well, I was gone at that point, but that gave Latino students, Chicano students, some power at the table at Long Beach State. But then she moves further into the political scene, Long Beach Unified School District. But I want to get now to the point I want to make about how important it is for us back then as students that we knew that at the end of the day, it's the political power we need, that we need to be at the table at every level that we can.
Right.
And today you have the results. I mean, when we talk about where we are now in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, that we're not perfect. We still have a ways to go. But for most of us in my age bracket, this is like paradise, because we had no one. And Roberto, you remember back at Long Beach State, if we were to approach the city council, good luck having anybody hear our causes and our issues. And I'm going back to the early 70s. And finally, Jenny gets to the city council. And there's this acreage over there on the west side or downtown that's being talked about turning it into a park. So Jenny moves quickly and says, we've got to get involved in this issue. Because the park, I think, if my memory serves me right, was a much discussed endeavor. And finally, in 1997, I believe, the city council voted, and they decided to name the park Cesar Chavez. That was a milestone. Because I could tell you, those of you who were here back then and were involved in that, there was a lot of people who wanted to rename that park other than any Latino name.
That's right.
And to have people, and I could tell you, and Ron, you remember this, are we going to name it after a labor leader? I had one person in the Long Beach community kind of political realm who actually said to me that it might attract gang members. And that's the truth. That's the environment that we had not too long ago in the 90s. I don't think anybody would dare say that in the public setting today. But suffice to say, it took Jenny to continue the cause And she put hours and hours into this endeavor that we are going to name the park Cesar Chavez.
Sorry.
And those of you who may have been here back then, the city council was going to vote on this issue. The city council was full of community people. And there was a vote. And we made it. And when I say we, I played a small part. Jenny made it. She was able to gather the political will, the consensus, the community. She filled that chamber. And it became known as Cesar Chavez Park. Yes. And why I mention that, that's just one small thing that of all the accolades that she has through her political career. But for Long Beach and for the people in downtown Long Beach and those kids today, I go by that park every day as I come off the 710 to downtown. And what is it, 100% Latinos there, the kids?
Yeah.
The park that they have there, the school that they have there, the families that are there, the people that are playing soccer. What a difference. And that only happened because Jenny Oropesa, she vowed that we were going to get this done, despite the challenges. So I think I want to make sure, I want to emphasize what she did for the community, because to this day, that park, and those of us who, like in my family, back in the day, going to the parque was a big thing, Even today, you go to Hartwell, the Latino families are there, picnicking. They may not live around the neighborhood, but they're there at the park. As a matter of fact, some of us live more and more in every district, and I think, remember Robert Garcia, we're a majority in every district but one. But anyway, I'm going far from the point of acknowledging the great career she had. And the last thing I want to mention, Sharon mentioned another aspect that was very important to her. Despite all the time that the agenda she had, whether as a school district member, as a council person, as a legislator, being a mentor. And I was hopeful that my daughter would get here by this time. She works in downtown LA, so late hours. But in the year 2001, I believe, or 2000, my daughter was getting an award from Robert Maxim to be the ambassador at Long Beach State. And she called Jenny to see if Jenny could come to the event. And I think she introduced Celine. And Jenny, being very busy, she took the call and she went to the event and met Celine. And Celine at the time was a senior at Long Beach State. And that difference for a student to meet a legislator, especially a Latina legislator, you don't know how much of a difference that makes to students at that age. And Celine will always remember that. Gloria and I will always remember that. So I say that not only did Jenny accomplish so many legislative objectives, endeavors, communities like a park, she took the time to make sure that the next generation would be there with the leadership that we need to have today for the next generation that's coming. And it's even more important today that we talk about this, because those of us know that there's an environment in DC that is shocking, that I never would have thought we revisit some of these issues. Ray Rodriguez wrote a book some years ago about the era that during the Depression that Mexicanos were just picked up off the street. And his father, who was a US citizen, was picked up and sent back to Mexico, and Ray never saw his father again. We are in these times again. So we miss Jenny, and so with that, I'll conclude my comments. But again, I just want to make sure that Cesar Chavez Park, that was a milestone. And today, it's, to go by there, you see there, the kids who are playing in that park, is because of Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, for all of that history, and thank you, Sharon, too. It just really brings the collection and the exhibits to life. So I'd like to acknowledge at this time the Board of Directors for the Historical Society of Long Beach. So if you're a board member, please raise your hand. All the work that we do at the Historical Society is really done as a team of board members, of community members, and staff. And I'd like to acknowledge a few of our very, very important staff people who are with us tonight who made this happen. First, I'd like to start with Jen Malone, HSLB's archivist. She installed the show, she processed the collection, and she's going to make sure there's a finding aid for people to find this material going forward. I'd like to next acknowledge Bianca Moreno. She is the Historical Society's program and design manager who designs all the installations and exhibits that you see around here, and she worked with Jesse Lopez to cut video, and one of the pieces of video is the story that Mario told about Cesar Chavez Park. So if you can see it tonight, see it, and if not, come back. And finally, I'd like to recognize Brian Chavez. We're going to stop and take a quick picture, and then I'll keep talking. The certificates are from Senator and Majority Leader Lena Gonzalez's office. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about Brian. He's worn many hats here. He has a 10-year history with us, starting when he was an LBCC student, and he has been a volunteer and a staff member with a changing job title that never quite fits. He's a historian, a talented curator, and an interpreter of history. I'm always impressed because Brian can greet people who come into the gallery who don't think they care about Long Beach history and talk about our collections and our exhibit in a way that brings meaning to even people who don't care. He also teaches all of us on a daily basis how to see these collections in a different way. So I witness as he changes my opinion or adds to my thoughts about what I know and affects other historians who think they already know about Long Beach history. We could not have asked for a better curator or person to work with the committee to produce the Centro de la Raza exhibition than Brian. And he carried that work and that knowledge of the community, both lived as somebody who grew up near Hartwell Park, into what he researched and wrote about Jenny Oropesa. So thank you, Brian. Next month, unfortunately, Brian's leaving us for another position, but I know that he will keep the relationships that he's made with all of us and with this institution, at least in a new form. So I'm proud to introduce to you today Brian N. Chavez, who's going to add some historical perspective to this meeting.
Thank you so much for coming today. It's been an absolute honor to be able to work here with the Historical Society again. I had disappeared for a little bit, and so to give you a little bit of backstory, I have been involved with this organization for now over 10 years. I started as this little dude from LBCC, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. Yeah, go Vikings! I love Long Beach City College. It gave me one of the most incredible experiences of my college life and career, and I'm thankful for Long Beach City College. I'm glad it exists, and I'm thankful for CSULB as well, and then also for my personal favorite alma mater, UCLA. Sorry, Ron Arias. But go Bruins. I did disappear for a minute, and I went to the National Park Service, where I worked in Sequoia National Park and Yosemite National Park. And then I got to come back here. Thanks so much to Julie Bartolotto, who's done an exceptional job with the Historical Society and has worked so hard. Who has worked so hard for years, for decades, to be able to tell these stories. You know, it's important to recognize that we were an organization founded in 1962 in a time period in which the citizens of Long Beach, they were seeing basically a restructuring city, a city that was fading away from what they originally recognized, and most importantly, something that they felt they loved and was Long Beach, which for a long time was the Pike, right? And they loved the Pike, and that history is important. It's important to share that story. So many people, so many diverse peoples went to the Pike, shaped this early city of Long Beach. But for so long too, in that story, the diversity of who was involved in that process was often ignored. And Julie has done an exceptional job to bring those stories to life and to look beyond the history of the Pike, to look at the history of all the different people that participated in World War II, to look at the history of the Japanese American community, to look at the history of now the Chicano community, and bring them into the history of our city that we all love so much. But I'm going to now say that, yeah, I'm leaving, so I'm sorry. But because I got other work to do, I do have to go back to the National Park Service. And I think, as it's already been hinted, it's a difficult time in the world right now, in our country. And I feel very committed to the work of the National Park Service. And so I am going to depart, but to continue sharing the history of really important peoples that have shaped our nation, not only our city, not only our local history, but our country as a whole. So now I go to protect the history of the ancestral Puebloans in Mesa Verde. Yeah, pretty cool. So a little bit, as I am a historian, trained historian, thank you so much for Commissioner Weissman's help on this. She's been awesome to have. Yeah, thank you. And she's been awesome to be able to work with on this project. I love hearing all the stories. I think that was always one of my favorite aspects of working here in the Historical Society, is that we're a community archive. And so we have the opportunity to continuously engage with the community for every exhibit that we do. And that's what also, again, continues to make this place so special. And so to be able to talk with Commissioner Weissman and hear stories was something, too, that reminded me of the experience I had with the Centro de la Raza committee and being able to hear all their stories. Of course, too, thank you to the Port of Long Beach, who's been an incredible supporter of us for a very long time, who we had the opportunity to work on the Workers' Harbor with last year. And that was an awesome exhibition that will be returning. So once Centro fades away, we get to have the Workers' Harbor in here, which is going to be really great. So another exhibition to check out. Yeah, woohoo! And another important story that I know the Harbor Commission was really pushing at making sure that the history that we showcase there, which is an over 100-year history, was reflective of the many diverse peoples that have shaped the Port of Long Beach and the labor that happened there. And so it's a really remarkable show that also highlights diversity in our community. And then, of course, above all, thank you to the family of Senator Oropeza. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to Tom Mullins, who may he rest in peace. May Jenny rest in peace. Thank you to Jenny for being here. I feel her in presence. I feel her in spirit. I know she is with us. And there are so many times I was sitting on that computer looking through her stuff and crying, because even though I never got to know her, you start to see the humanity in the people that have shaped our community. And that is what our collections are about. It's about the human experience of who we are as people. I didn't think I was going to be the one to cry today. Wow! Thank you, Bianca. But thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to dive into this story, explore it, and to give you an important, a historian's job is not just to outline the points. This happened in 1942, then this happened in 1950, and that's not really a historian's job. A historian's job is to weave that story together, to build an argument, to tell why it happened and shape the context and give us an understanding through it. And so I think it's important to understand that context. And one of the reasons why I really fought to make sure that we had the Centro de la Raza close on the same day that the Jenny Oropeza show will open is because I see it as a passing of the torch, a passing of the story from one generation to the next. In understanding the history of Jenny, it's important to go back to the first Chicanos, the very first ones who in the 1960s looked to the monumental challenge faced ahead of finding dignity and being able to explore the beauty of who we are as indigenous peoples, as Christians, as Muslim, as Black, as Mexicans. In that here, we find the beauty of who we are as the Chicano people. And that story is not just the story of California, it's not just the story of the American Southwest, but it is the story of Long Beach. And here in Long Beach, some Chicanos came together and they created an organization which today we call El Centro de la Raza, whose work you see here on these walls. And I had the incredible opportunity to work with the Chicano Community History Committee, with JT, who even though he also wasn't with us at the time of creating the exhibit, whose spirit lives within me, and I know he was here and doing the work. Armando Vasquez Ramos, who is now passed away, but was able to be here to share that story before he left us. Of course, Margie Rodriguez, Carmen Perez, Ron Arias, Teresa Marino, Phyllis Arias. Really, I think I mentioned everybody. I hope I did. But thank you for trusting this organization with this story, for trusting me with this story and being able to share it. Also, too, I see you as my elders, who I hold great admiration and respect for. Thank you, too, to Virginia Escobar, Tony Vasquez, Irena Cervantes, Henry Taboada, Irma Chuleta, and most importantly, Ana Luisa. Thank you for sharing these artifacts, these photos, the people and the stories of the Centro de la Raza and JT. This show would not look the way it did without the people I just mentioned there. So to understand the history of the Centro, we have to go back to the farm workers movement, a catalyst for this larger movement that occurred amongst students going to CSULB for the very first time, feeling called to change their community. In that, they created an organization that I mentioned before, El Centro de la Raza, but unfortunately, as we all recognize, the Centro is no longer here. It was an important story and a pivotal moment in the history of our city for the Chicano community, but the organization is no longer here in the same way. And part of that, I think as a historian, it's important to recognize history does not repeat itself, but history does rhyme. What ended up happening is difficulty, challenges that were faced ahead by the lack of federal funding when once an organization was so strongly supported by Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty. The fading of that federal funding ended up resulting in the loss of the Centro de la Raza. Infighting as well that was created by the challenges they faced financially further destroyed the organization. And by the late 1980s, the Centro was no more. But to a certain degree, I must recognize that that story is not fully true, that the Centro is still here. As we are evident in this room right now, the Centro is still alive. And of course, it most lived in the efforts of the Chicano Political Caucus, which was acknowledged earlier. The work of the Chicano Political Caucus was a work that started in the mid-1970s, an effort by members of the Centro de la Raza and also nearby community members and Chicano allies that came together to make sure that politics were reflective of the needs of the Chicano community, an act of self-determination to ensure that Chicanos were put into roles of politics. They were the change makers. They were having a seat at the table, as was mentioned earlier. Jenny Oropeza did get to encounter the Chicano Political Caucus. There's a picture on this wall in the Chicano Political Caucus section of the Centro de la Raza picture, which I encourage you to go check out. A very, very young Jenny Oropeza hanging out with Phyllis Arias and getting some drinks out to the public. So it's a pretty fun picture, a different picture that you don't expect of a California senator. But that goes to show you the early work that was done there. And in that photograph too, that was a passing of the torch from one generation to the next. Jenny would go on to meet many roles and be the one to establish the first role of not only a Chicana, but of a Chicano, of someone in a seat of power that looked different than the people who once originally held those seats of power, whether it was in city council, whether it was in the LBUSD board, or even at the highest levels. She challenged and broke barriers at every single office that she entered. And this story back here is reflective of that. You see the challenge and the change, and not only that, you see the details of how that came to be, because it's not, again, just a date and, oh, this happened. It's this happened because. And so as you look around in this exhibition, I encourage you to look at these collections with detail. Look at them for what they fully are. Watch the videos. See all the context that made up Jenny. Because you'll find a more richer story of who we are as a people and who the city of Long Beach is. Now, with this, of course, as you remember from the Centro de la Raza opening, for those who were here, I did have the opportunity to curate, and I like to give a little bit of orientation to the show. So the show is not titled Discovering a Senator or Discovering the Honorable. It's a recognition, instead, discovering Jenny, a recognition of her humanity, her humility, and her unwavering authenticity of character. She was a human. She was a person just like each and every one of us. This educational installation, too, may be smaller than the other exhibitions we have put up here in the Historical Society, but it is not small in the context of story, as I've only hinted at some of it. In it, I tried to capture so much of the senator's life, from personal notes to photographs to Senate documents, and even a shovel is in the show. Thank you, Sharon. Never thought I'd be pulling a shovel out of a Tesla. But there we were. And then, of course, too, behind me is a quote that further recognizes that being a leader is hard, that being a leader is not easy, and that, of course, we must be unafraid and willing to do the right thing. That is something that she said in her farewell speech to the Long Beach City Council when she served on it. That was her goodbye, a very emotional goodbye that I remember crying at my desk. I'm like, I never met her, but oh my God. But in that video where she also cries, you can see the passion and the heart, the dedication that she had for her community, for her people. She's promised to be a politician for everyone, and I fully authentically believe that she was a politician for everyone, but she never let go of who she was as a person, whether it be as a Latina, as a Mexicana, or of course too, as a woman. In each and every door that she entered, she carried her background into it and brought truth and life and meaning. She helped bring new perspectives to places that often lacked it. In those materials, again, I encourage you to view them. And I have to admit that I wasn't the one who put those materials together. I kind of gave a concept, I had a concept of a plan. And thank you, I want to say thank you to Jen Malone and Bianca Moreno, who stepped in for me to design a display case and install the show. Jen used her incredible capacity to multitask, which I'm always so inspired by, and her ability to think about so many things all at once and be able to compile this very, very beautiful, what I call a collage of the senator's political career, starting with being an AS president at Cal State Long Beach. And then, of course, Bianca added her artistic eye, her passion for seeing the human experience in material culture. She aided her in her designing with the text panels, the promotional materials, and of course with the display cases on the senator's desk materials, offering us an insight into what her desk might have had on it, including even a lighthouse. And I was, you know what, to be honest, I was glad that I could actually step away, because it's important that me as a man is not telling a woman's story. And so I'm thankful that two very incredible women, had the opportunity to tell that story. Now, I want to conclude with saying when I first put up the Centro de la Raza exhibition, I have to admit I did not fully understand how impactful this exhibit was going to be. But so many people have come here. Our First Fridays are so full of people, every single First Friday, just so excited and about discovering what the history of Long Beach is. Discovering, too, that they are part of that history. We have such a, as was mentioned earlier, such a large Latino population here. It's important to acknowledge that, and it's been incredible to have that community, my community, come in and see themselves reflected in their history and in their heritage here in Long Beach. And now, you know, as I mentioned before, it's unique. We face a unique political and social climate, and history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so I wish that Centro would still be up, because it shows the dignity of who we are as Chicanos, the beauty, the culture, the resilience, and it gives the next generation, as the committee did for me, the next generation, the power to have the courage to fight, to keep fighting for our community. Every day, I'm inspired by the resilience, dedication, and courage of the Chicano generations before me. From the Chicanos of the Centro to the Chicana senator behind me. I am so thankful that in my time here, I had the opportunity to work with them to tell these stories, to remind people today that Chicano history, Mexican history, immigrant history, and women's history is Long Beach history. Thank you. Okay, wait, I'm not done. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce a really incredible individual who had the honor of working with on the Centro, and now again my elder, retired director of City of Long Beach Department of Health and Human Services, Ron Arias. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, sir. Ron, here. You click this on yourself. What do I do? Right there.
Thank you, Brian. And I also want to mention that Brian was a star student of a very good friend of many of the people in here, Julian Delgado, professor at Long Beach City College. So, I just want to, I had a few things here, but I'm just going to say thank you to the Historical Society for the work that they have done, for the passion and the commitment that they have made to the entire community, but in this particular instance, to our community, to the Chicano community. This idea of this exhibit has been rolling around in my head since 1972, when we put together the first yearbook. JT, John, and myself did that as workers at the Centro. It was a summer escuelita, and we wanted to document the work that we were doing. And we were able to do that, but we took hundreds of pictures. And John had continued to take thousands of pictures over the years. And he had these in boxes and files in different places. And he always wanted to get these things exhibited or put into a book or placed in some sort of a capacity where people had access to them. And as he got sick, we talked about this more and more. And all I can say is that I promised him that we would do something. I wasn't sure exactly what, but, we began this discussion with the Historical Society. And I want to thank Julie for, it was our connection. Julie and I met and had this discussion. She totally embraced the idea. She thought it was amazing, and she said, well, it's going to cost money. And we said, oh boy. And to our surprise, yeah, we raised a lot of money. We were very surprised about that. But I also want to thank Brian and, of course, Bianca. They were the three staff that did most of the work on the actual exhibit. A lot of this stuff, as I mentioned, was in John. John had a man cave that Well, you'd have to know him, and you'd have to visit the place to understand that he probably had about 5,000 vinyl records. You know, we're from the 60s, so I don't need to express or explain, you know, who we are, what we did during the 60s, but we did it, and we loved it. We loved it. And so John had all of these negatives and stuff, and we realized that we couldn't make them public until they became digitized. So we thought, oh, that won't be too hard. And then we got a scanner and stuff. We helped him buy a scanner. Many of you in this room contributed. So we purchased a scanner, and he started this process. Anyone who's done this knows it's a very slow and tedious process. You can do like nine negatives, stick it in the scanner, and it takes like 3 to 4 to 5 minutes to get that copy. But during his last months, you know, I don't know what, but he got energized. He got that scanner, and he started doing this 10 hours a day. 10 hours a day. He'd go sleep for a few hours, he'd get up and go back. And I want to thank Anna for backing him up, because he was very sick. He was already dying. He had already been dying for a year. And I mean, he was very sick. But Anna, Dee Dee, and Aaron, his 2 daughters, I mean, they loved this man and cared for him. Anyway, he got this done. He got it done. And we were able to actually, you know, have it in a little thumb drive, 3,000 negatives. But we pulled that together, and, you know, with that, we were able to create this exhibit. The thing that really is the most important thing here is that we are a part of this community. We have always been a part of this community, and they can't take that away from us. That's right. They can't take that away from us. But and you know, with what's going on in DC, I mean, it's going to be tough. But you know what? We're going to have to get back. I think we're going to have to march again. I don't think that there's any way around it. And I don't know where our leadership is. I mean, Robert has done, you know, an incredible job. You know, but Robert was not a naturalized, he's a naturalized citizen. He wasn't born in the United States. So we can't run him for president in 10 years. So, but he is one of the brightest and the most visible leaders on the Capitol right now. But we need all of them to stand up, and that's not happening. But again, when you look at this exhibit, I hope that it just reminds you of what we can do and what we have done, and hopefully that our youth will. I am again inspired by these young people that are demonstrating again. We haven't seen that in quite a few years. I mean, we demonstrated every freaking weekend. It was either for Chavez or for, you know, the war, or for, you know, something, university this or university that. But we participated, and people would pick you up, and you'd be half asleep. Where are we going? Don't worry, we got to go. And we'd drive, and we'd be there, and then we'd see all the other people. And you know what? We stood up. But we stood up for things that we believed in. And I know that everybody in this room is, you know, they're part of that. So again, I want to thank the Historical Society for this beautiful exhibit. And of course, the segue to Jenny, because, you know, I remember meeting Jenny. We met Jenny at the Jerry Brown reception in 1980 when she came knocking at the door. Is Carmen here? Because I'm Jenny Oropesa, and I wanted to meet. They told me that I had to come here to meet Carmen. Yeah, she's here. But anyway, we do have a long history, but all of you are part of that history. I want to thank again the Historical Society. You have put us on the map again. But we've already been on the map, but we've put it on with an exclamation point. And Brian, thank you so much. Bianca, I mean, these guys were passionate about their work. And of course, it begins with their leadership. And Julie, I mean, she let these guys run. I mean, she's not micromanaging. I mean, these guys were getting this thing going. So they have done incredible work, and I hope that the Jenny exhibit is equally successful. And again, I just want to thank all of you, and again, the Historical Society, thank you so much for making this a reality.